What's up? I'm Ayla.
Hi, I'm Beth Ann.
And this is Let's Talk BL, a boys love podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's a random day of the week. It's the day of the week that we
No,
release
it's
the podcast.
it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
Lord have mercy. It's only the beginning of the year and there's just so much. I feel like I'm, trying to take in what 2023 has to offer and still catching up on 2022 stuff.
I'm over 2022. I'm done with 2022. 2022 is dead to me.
There's just like endless things and endless places to go. And yeah, I'm excited about what's to come.
So today on the podcast, we are talking about the fandom because it's 2023 and things have gotten crazy. I feel like particularly in this past year. So you've been a fan a little bit longer than me, but I've been a fan now for starting next month, 2 years. Will be my second year. So I kind of have realized that like I'm in this place where I'm noticing just like the differences between how quickly things moved the past year versus the year before. Even the year before, like it felt like the year before we moved an inch and last year we moved a mile. Like it kind of like now that we're wrapping up and we're getting close to the second year, I'm like, oh my God, things have really changed in a way bigger way in 2022 than they did in 2021.
Right. The BL timeline, as we talk about constantly, is wild on many fronts as fans meeting other fans and consuming all the content that comes out, but then just like what new actors we meet, who we like, what new stuff we discover each year. Because I think what we forget is that in BL time and BL world, BL started really in like 2014, I believe.
Ooh, you're gonna make some people mad with that one.
So the like what we know as BL today, right? Like Lovesick, then Sodas, and like kind of the like popularity of BL. Like sure, you have the BL of like Love of Siam, which I think was in like early 2000s, and then of course like where it started in Japan, like there's definitely origins past it, but as we know BL today, where it mostly comes from Thailand and then also from Korea and Taiwan and all those places, was not too long ago. And so there's definitely been some growing pains prior to last year, plus the pandemic. So then we get to, I think last year was the start of everything opening back up and people seeing what the landscape of fans are, as we've talked about before, where you need storylines. You can't just pander to people. There are even grown-ups in this fandom. It's not a specific type of person.
Like, I think the way the fandom has grown, I focus less on what BL has done and more about how the fans have reacted to it. Like that's kind of where, like, when we talked about this angle, like I'm coming in talking about the fandom is not what happened in BL, because ultimately, like, it is important. That's the whole point. But that's not what's important, because from year to year, the tropes are going to change. The focuses are going to change. The types of fan meetings they do are going to change. Like that just has always happened. I think what was significant, at least as like me kind of like watching it, was what the fandom did. Not what BL did, but what the fandom did in interacting with BL.
Do you think that... So the question then is, does BL influence who's attracted to it, or do fans influence what BL does? Like,
I think it's a little bit of both. But I think that like really kind of what has happened, and I'm sure that like we were not the first BL fans, and we certainly don't have the history with it as other people do, but it just in watching these past 2 years, the difference in the significance is the way that the fandom itself has opened up. And so like not necessarily the fandom's influence on BL, although that does happen, but I think that it happens to less of an extent than people think it does. And then also, yeah, sure, what kinds of BLs are attracting fans, but history always repeats itself. And these kinds of like storylines, like we've seen these before, right? So like like A Secret Crush on You has all of those. We talked like old school BL tropes. That's what was kind of fun about it. And so like we're seeing the same things happen over and over again. So I don't think it's necessarily that what's in BL is attracting new people necessarily. Now, of course, you had like Kin Porsche come on the scene.
Right.
And Kin Porsche was very different in a sense than most other BLs that we had seen out of Thailand. And I want to be very clear that like I'm talking about Thailand because Taiwan and Japan have always had the more mature, the action BLs. Like all of these tropes, all of these things we saw in Kin Porsche didn't start with Kin Porsche, right? Like
they exist elsewhere.
They existed elsewhere in Taiwanese BLs and Japanese BLs, right? And so it's really not that Kin Porsche is, although I'm going to get some heat for this, groundbreaking,
right?
In the overall BL. Now, this is, as far as I know, the first of its type in Thailand. The only thing that I think is like close is Not Me.
Yeah.
And so that is one thing that like this past year had in common is the introduction of like Not Me and Kin Porsche and that like style of BL. Because even on some level, Big Dragon is like the little brother of those two, right? It was like darker, it was more grown up, it was the way that it was shot stylistically, all of that kind of stuff. And so like this is kind of, that's like a new era that has happened this past year. But again, that's not a new thing in the world of BL.
Right. Because I think that was the thing, especially last year when we did get Kin Porsche, people were like, oh, finally a BL for the grown-ups.
Right.
Finally, we're leaving school. Finally, we're, getting out of this rut. Because, like, the spice definitely has existed in other BLs. So it wasn't necessarily that. I think it was the mature storyline. It was BL just that cast people as grown-ups.
Like history, right? Like,
right. I think, and like what you were saying,
and then Love Life on the Line, right? So that's a Taiwanese example and a Japanese example of like those are grown up. We're out of school. We're like there's danger, there's action, there's like all of these things. Now, Love Life on the Line moved throughout their lives, but I feel like for me, most of that show is when they're grown,
adults,
when they're grown, and so. Again, like it's not like Kin Porsche introduced this idea. So I don't know necessarily that I think the content of BL is what's attracting new fans. I think it's the way that the fandom itself has started to behave.
Engages
with each other, the content and each other. Like I think that's the big thing is like the fandom engaging with each other.
Right. So a little bit of backstory for us. I was into pop culture in general growing up and only in the past 5 years got into K-pop and really engaged in what I would consider like a fandom. I was fans of things, but I never felt part of a fandom. I never engaged where I would call myself like kind of how in K-pop we have like Universe or Army or XOLs. Like I never associated myself with a group, a fandom specifically. And so when I got into K-pop, it was really the first time that I engaged with like a fandom as a whole and kind of really sought out other people and made friends through this thing that I was interested in. Like I never had hobbies that I really made friends with people because of something I was a fan of.
And see, my experience was so much different.
Yeah.
Is I've always been a fandom. And I think that like a little bit is probably because we've talked about this before where like you've told me stories about how you like there was a book or something that would like tell you like an address of a celebrity and you could like write them a letter.
In like the 90s.
Never in the 90s, I was a baby. I was like an actual child. So
it was like Crisscross and
I literally don't know who that is.
Like
I'm so sorry.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Like, I do remember that name.
It was Brad Pitt and like
I know who Brad Pitt
Jennifer
is.
Aniston. It was like it was just random
celebrities.
They're like a hip hop duo. They wore their clothes backwards.
Fun.
You should go check them out. They're
really
so
ridiculous. Like I think the difference there is sort of generational in that like I was a baby in the 90s, and so when I wasn't a baby anymore and became a fan of things, message boards and AIM chats and things like that existed. So I think it was a lot easier to engage with fandom.
And your generation was online more.
Right. That's what I mean.
Whereas
is like
that existed, of course, for me in those early stages, but we just weren't online. Like, I didn't have not dial up until I went to college. So then even in college, I wasn't engaging online. I was still very much offline.
And so I just think that's fascinating in that, like, general fandom, like how the experience of, again, fandoms engaging with each other really change your experiences. You felt very solitary because the way that the fandom engaged was one-on-one kind of with the artist that they liked. And then my generation, the reason I'm so comfortable with fandom and I like it, and I know, like, you know, it feels like a comfortable space for me, is not only have I always been kind of like a nerd and been into things that like have fandoms, but also the way that fans interacted with each other in my generation was always built around like message boards and internet chat rooms and, you know, things. And even like when I was in high school, like we had Twitter, and so like Stan Twitter was a thing when I was like young, you know. And so like it's just interesting the way that, like, as time goes on, fandoms engage with each other differently. And I think that's what's so interesting and special about the BL fandom, especially going into 2023, is the way that fans have started to change the way that we engage with each other. And because, like, it's so much more open, because BL was this interesting space where, like, we're in the modern world. We were in 2020, 2021 when we became fans, right? But it still was so closed off. Like, it was very separated, right? We all kind of had, like, it seemed little pockets of fans. And none of the pockets really engaged with each other. And one thing that I noticed, especially like towards the end of 2022, is the pockets started engaging with each other. And it's like we're moving more towards like one big fandom. That, of course, we all have our ship focus. It's kind of like the K-pop fandom. Like, we're all in the K-pop fandom together, but within the K-pop fandom, you've got your army and your universe and your so like and then even within those groups, so like we are both army and Agassiz and universes, but really we're universes, right? Really we are universe. And so like you have your focus, and so it's like it drills down, but we engage with the K-pop fandom as a whole. We know who XOLs are, we know who the boys are, we know who like like
there's not
are there's it's not
our timeline
separate.
Is like all of the K-pop groups.
It's not separate. And I think that's what's starting to happen with BL, is that it's not separate anymore, which has been very interesting to watch.
Well, and I think it's different for international fans, because we talked to a Thai fan recently and they were like, you just have to pick one boy or one set of boys and really focus all your energy on them, because there's so much going on.
There's so many events
in Thailand.
And we learned this firsthand. If you listen to our episodes about us being in Thailand and the mistakes we made, the only mistake that we admit to making in Thailand, though we made many, the only one we admit to is trying to go to everything.
All the things. And so as a international fan, it's nice to be engaged with a bunch of different fandoms and a bunch of different people, because then you get exposure to more things, right? Like, we can easily log on to an online fan meeting any day of the week, whereas like we're not having to go to an
physically
event,
go to a place.
and but so it makes it a little different, I think.
Even Thai fans, I think I've noticed, especially like online, are spreading out, from what I can tell, from what I can see, are engaging with the BL fandom as a whole, right? More so than, you know, of course, I'm not in the Thai fandoms. I don't speak the Thai, but like from what I've observed, because like, for example, I remember when I first got into BL, and I was really searching for your community. You were kind of like, I'm just going to make the people I know like this. And I was like, no, I'm going to find my people, because I was so used to that, right? Like, I'm a Supernatural fan. I used to go to Supernatural conventions. I went to so many of them. I'm a big Hunger Games fan. I went to all the like Hunger Games events. I was like, when the movies would come out, you'd like wait in line. I was in like Hunger Games, like Tumblr fandoms, like Tumblr. Like I was on Hunger Games Tumblr. Like all of these things, I was like, no, there's when I got into BL, I was like, no, there's got to be a community. Like, I'm not happy with just knowing one person. I have so many thoughts and I want to hear from so many other people. I need to find a community.
Right.
And so I noticed as I was searching, and I found a lot of different pockets of the community, that they never overlapped. Like, I would see the same people here and there, like in one group. And then I would notice that they only interacted with each other on a different platform. Right. So, like, if I found a pocket on Discord, I noticed when I would go to Twitter, they weren't interacting with other fans that weren't in the Discord. They were still only interacting with their Discord friends. Right. It wasn't, there were these pockets and you couldn't really find each other. And I think that BL TikTok has also helped this. But even within BL TikTok, I've noticed that, like,
you have your clicks.
There are clicks, and even now there are different groups where you'll say, like, oh, do you know so and so, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, no, I've never seen their TikTok before. This person's so cool. I wish I knew who they, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, like, the way I think it's that fans, from what I can tell, are starting to search each other out more, which I think is so interesting. And it seems, based on what I've observed, like that's something new versus, like, it seemed like we all used to kind of look for a community and then we would find a pocket and we'd stay in that pocket. We'd be like, I found my people and I'm going to stay here. Right.
Because I think it feels safe for people when you know that somebody has the same interests and same thoughts that you do. We see this in just like the real world in general, where if you seek out people who think and act and feel the same way you do, it's much safer and easier than to then go be exposed to other things and different things and be like, oh, maybe this character like I saw this character differently, or for us to differ on things. And so I have seen that conversation, especially on Twitter, where people are like disagreeing, but in a healthy way, where we are finally hopefully getting to a place in BL where not everybody likes certain aspects of a show, or not,
and that's okay.
Yeah, and not everybody likes,
as long as you're not being problematic, right?
Right. And like not everybody likes certain characters or certain things or whatever, and that's okay, because maybe it gives you a different perspective. I mean, we've had people respond on YouTube to certain episodes of ours where people are like, I don't agree with you, but I can understand where you're coming from.
Well, and we've gotten emails, we really appreciate all that stuff. But, like, yeah, I think what's interesting about the BL fandom that I've noticed compared to all the other fandoms I've ever been in, I've been in a lot. I also was in many. I was like a member of like the book like the book. I mean, you would nowadays would call it like book talk, but like booktube, like the book fandom. I'm a big reader, and I like love YA, and that just like has a fandom attached to it, right? And so, like, all the fandoms I've been in, I was very into Dream Street. I was very into like many different bands, and I was in those fandoms and things. So I've been in lots of fandoms, including K-pop. And one of the things that I've noticed about the BL fandom, as everyone started to interact with each other more, is that it's not yet become as angry and toxic as the others. Now, I'm starting to see glimmers of this, and it makes me really sad. Every time I see it, and I'll like go on tangents about it, because I'm like, this is the thing that makes other fandoms miserable.
Right.
Like, when you're in a fandom and people are just like angry at each other. And like when people are very much so like taking one sentence and like it just sets them off and they run with it. Like, that's not a conversation. That's not a community. And it's like the anger over the like and the gatekeeping over all of that like in other fandoms is so prevalent that makes those fandoms miserable in some senses that I don't see as much in BL, but I am starting to see like glimmers of it here and there. And I just like, I really hope we don't go in that direction. Like, we've done so good so far as like a group.
Well, I think what I've seen and the places that I've seen it, it's the ones who get the most popularity and are the biggest, have the biggest fandom. Because what happens within fandoms is the bigger you get, the more different types of ages, the different types of backgrounds, the different types of whatever. And you have a ton of people with a ton of different opinions and not always the most mature. And therefore, whether you're 15 or 45, you can act the same way at either age. So I'm talking about just
emotional maturity is not the same thing as age. Yeah.
And so you will have just so many people. And if someone differs opinions, you're going to get upset and you're unable, because you love this thing so much that you're like, how dare you speak out? But the problem is that like
they may not even intend for it to be negative that way. You're just reading it as
Yeah.
negative, and then like you get so angry. But
I do
that being
wish,
said,
though, I do wish that we would get to a place, and I don't think this will ever happen because it's the internet, and people like the internet is the place we go to say the thing we don't say in real life.
right? You would never say to someone's face.
Yeah, I wish that we'd get to a place where like the age-old rule of like, don't say anything unless you have something nice to say. Like, there's no point in putting out.
Yeah, that's never gonna happen.
There's no point in putting out that negativity. I will say, like, it's fine to put out like differences of opinion and to be like, oh, I didn't see it
it's
that
the
way.
Anger.
Or like,
but
the,
I will say, as a whole,
toxic
negativity. The fandom of BL has, I think, done a very good job in not doing that, right? Like the conversations that I see as people are like crossing over,
right,
are pretty reasonable. They're like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. Or they just like won't engage with something rather than trying to like take it down. Right. And rather than trying to be like, well, this is bad and this is terrible and this is why, they just won't engage with it. Right. And so like overall, I think that does make the BL fandom really unique compared to other fandoms, is that there are only glimmers of that toxic anger.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I kind of we've started to see, but that the fandom overall, what makes this group so unique is the unwillingness to like speculate, right? Like and I think it's cool and fun to just like take these people at face value, because that's what they're giving us, and that's what they mean to share with us, and that's what they're trying to give to us, and that's okay. And but instead of like trying to speculate about like they're doing this or that or blah 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 and this means this, and like, now it's fun. Listen, I'm not gonna say it's not super fun, but like sometimes that can get really toxic and mean really fast, and you see people say things that can be really damaging. And you see people who make jokes and then they get attacked. Like we were just talking to a creator recently who was like, yeah, I made this joke and it just like was not received well, and just, and that happened to us. I made a joke one time and it was not received well. Right. And so like it's that kind of behavior of like, I'm gonna speculate about these real life people, and that as a whole the BL fandom doesn't really do on a super negative level. Now of course we all do this because they're celebrities and it's celebrity gossip and it's fun, but on a whole, I think the BL community is unique compared to especially like other kind of celebrity fandoms, that they don't do that as like, we don't do that as much.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about the way that BL presents itself is that so many of these actors share so much with everybody on social media and online that like you can fill up enough time just talking about a post that somebody makes, or just from what they actually tell you and say to you. Like you can speculate, because I think speculation and things like that come from people not sharing stuff, and these actors share so much, and especially when they have the ship work, you can even go so far as, specifically coming from K-pop or boy band world, where there was tons of shipping, where we already have shipping, like we have intentional shipping,
right? But I think that's where we lead to when we get into this like dangerous conversation that I hope the BL fandom avoids. Although like we kind of have it now, but like in a joking way. I feel like most people, most being the like keyword there, are like, haha, they're real.
Yeah.
Right? Like that kind of situation where it's like, no, they're real. You can't prove it otherwise. Like, but most people understand that like when we say they're real, we mean it as like these two not necessarily a joke, but like the fictionalized versions of themselves that they're giving us, not the real life people when they go home at night.
Their personalities, their personas are
their
real.
personas are real.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that most people understand that and don't really think that like when they go home they're actually dating.
Right.
Are some of them? Sure, maybe. Are some of them dating people in other couples? Sure, maybe.
Yeah.
Are some of them dating people of the opposite sex? Sure, maybe.
Oh my god.
Are some people dating someone that's not even in the entertainment industry?
Yeah.
Sure, maybe. Right? Like, but the point is like, there's less speculation of that kind of thing I've noticed in the BL fandom, which I think is like a nice difference compared to like some other like literally I saw a K-pop post today where they were, and you see this all the time. I remember seeing this like back in the day, especially for like within Pentagon because there's so many of them, where it was like, okay, there's this little illustration,
oh my god,
and in the illustration, the boy in the illustration has an earring on the same side as Yeonjun from TXT. And they're like, clearly it's him. Clearly they're dating.
Oh yeah.
I was like, are you for real right now? Like we like this is a bit much for me.
I have seen that a little bit within BL, which is really funny because here's the funny thing too, specifically within BL.
Because no other K-pop boys have an earring on that same side.
Right. Specifically in BL, it's funny because they'll be like, oh my gosh, this person is wearing the same shirt that this other person wore. And it's like, you guys know that like they make more than one.
Also, the other thing that I don't get about that, and I never even understood it in K-pop either, but I think this just has to do with the fact that like I have had the great privilege to work in the creative industry, is that like they don't actually own those clothes that they're wearing in most cases. If it's a styled appearance, their stylist brought that. Their stylist owns that. That t-shirt has been on 85 other K-pop boys. That t-shirt has been on whatever K-pop group hired that stylist.
And even on another note, a lot of fans give stuff to boys, so like probably 80% of what these boys wear are given to them, so they're not even buying it or intentionally picking it up.
It's the styled appearance stuff that gets me, because I'm like, wait, they don't own that, the stylist owns it. Like, what?
I know. I think that if you don't know that world very well, you're like, oh my gosh, and it's like they're wearing that because it was on the runway 2 weeks ago and they want to wear like the most
what's a super funny example of this in the BL world? Okay, Petch. Petch did because Petch has a YouTube channel, right? And like old back in the day, like maybe like a year and a half ago, he did a video with Pond, a makeup artist who used to do Yinwar's makeup, and so Petch was doing this video with and like asking about Yinwar, as you do, because same Petch. Like, I mean, that's why I feel that, right? Like, and they're talking about this like photo shoot that Yinwar had done.
He was recreating something that Yin had done.
That War had done.
Okay,
it was that War had done. And they're talking about this photo shoot, and Petch is like, yeah, because people had told Petch he looked like War. This is why we're doing it, right? And so he's like, yeah, and they're talking about the outfit, and Pond goes, actually, that's my jacket. I can go upstairs and get it. Do you want to wear it? And so in that moment, like, War had worn that, Pond had worn that, Petch had worn that. By the like wearing the same clothing logic, Petch and War, they're real.
Well, they're in a throuple.
They're in a throuple, exactly. And that's whoever else of Pond's friends have worn that jacket since, right? Like, it's just like, it's a funny example of this, like, the speculation can get you in trouble sometimes.
Yeah, all of just like the way that people engage with the BL fandom comes from a ton of different experiences and backgrounds that you have. And so it will be interesting to see as the BL fandom gets bigger and as we do interact with people more, whether it be on Twitter or Discord or IG or TikTok. Every platform kind of has its own narrative, I feel like, and its own conversation and its own.
But there's crossovers now where people are on everything.
And so it really is interesting to see those different voices and just different perspectives and people being able to have conversations, and that it isn't just one-sided, because that's what happens when you do have such separation, is that you only hear one thing and it's only one-sided and you only get one perspective. And so when you get multiple perspectives, it makes the fandom bigger, because then more people can relate to different aspects of what is available.
Yeah, another thing that I love about the BL fandom, and I think this just comes from this sort of ingrained thing, and we were talking about this with Jovi recently, who, by the way, if you don't follow Jovi, go follow him. We'll put his at It's Jovi Champ on everything. He's awesome TikTok creator. He's also on IG on everything. We were talking to him about this, where like, when you're like a baby BL fan, the BL fandom is like so welcoming and soft, right? That like I feel like makes it so unique because, and I think the reason it makes it unique, and this is what we were talking about with Jovi, is that there's still this sort of like ingrained thing in a lot of BL fans that like this is an embarrassing hobby or this is an embarrassing thing that I like. And I think slowly that's going away, right? Because again, we've talked about this since we started the podcast, is that like the more you talk about it, the more normal it becomes. The more we sit here and say like, no, this is just a fun thing that I like. It's not hurting anyone. I'm being responsible with it. These other fans are being responsible with it. This is a fun thing. It's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Right.
The less that happens. I mean, I gave an example of like when because as a kid, I lived in Korea for a period of time. And so I have like been into K-pop long before K-pop was a thing in America. And I remember like even still like 5 or 6 years ago, I had people that I loved and knew call K-pop that weird Korean thing Ayla likes. Nobody would say that about K-pop now, for the most part. Nobody would say K-pop is a weird Korean thing that like some offshoot of society likes. And so like that's because nobody was talking about it like it was just like a thing that we can all like. And so it's the same thing with BL. And I think that because as BL fans, we've had that happen where it's like, oh, those weird shows you like, right? Like that kind of judgment. We've had that from outside sources. Yeah. The BL fandom in particular is so, so welcoming and kind. And like, you're never going to find someone who, at least in my experience, who's like, get out of this fandom if you don't like or haven't seen or don't know about this, right? Like, if you don't know about this, what are you even doing here, right? Like, or there's also not a lot of I've been here longer than you, so I'm better than you, which is something you see a lot in K-pop as a fandom, which I never really experienced in any of my other fandoms. That's something kind of like, in my experience, unique to K-pop is like, I've been here longer, I'm better than you.
I wonder if it's because each generation has experienced such different landscapes of popularity, whereas I feel like with BL we're still under the same landscape.
I think it's because like we are, in a sense, this fandom is marginalized. Not even in a sense, like this fandom represents a marginalized community. It represents the people, many of the people in this fandom, not everybody, are marginalized people in society on some level, right? And so like it's very much protection, I think, like feel like where like, okay, we need to be a safe place. As a fandom, I think everybody just kind of feels like we need to be a safe place for people when they get into this, because we know that when they're outside of the fandom, talking about this hobby might not be a safe place still.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see with the popularity of Western BLs, where you have like Heartstopper and Young Royals and Love Simon and all of these things that don't necessarily get labeled BL, but as people kind of discover those and then venture into Asian BLs, if there will be more of kind of how when we were talking to Piaf, where you know that it, or I think he actually said in another interview where he was talking about how it's no longer subculture when it is sponsored by big companies. And so it's gone mainstream in Thailand, but worldwide, kind of how what we saw it with K-pop, we've seen it with Parasite, we've seen it with Asian media. It kind of slowly gets popularized, but it takes time. And so not only do BLs have that like LGBTQ kind of like marginalized label on it, but it also comes from Asia, which a lot of times is still not. I mean,
racism is real. Yeah, racism is real.
You still have BTS having a hard time being played on the radio, kind of thing.
Well, and it's interesting. Like that point is interesting because I have a friend who he's a very good person overall, and it's one of the no, he is
in general.
I want to preface this before telling the story, and also because like we all in the world in general, but especially as Westerners, and then people who are men have a different experience and people who
Right.
are women have a different experience, and then people who are white have an even different, right? And so like
Right.
we all have these unconscious biases
Right.
that we don't realize are racist until
Mm.
someone points out like, hey, that behavior is racist, and then you feel so guilty and you want to change it. And that's the point. That's a good thing. Those conversations are good,
Yeah.
because we have these unconscious biases that we don't even know are biases. We
Right.
don't even realize until somebody tells you. And so I have this friend who is a gay man, and we were talking about Heartstopper, and he was like, I would never watch BL, but I loved Heartstopper, but I would never watch BL. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you watch BL? And he was like, well, they're just two different things. And I was like, well, why are they two different things? And I like kind of had to get him there to like get him to realize like the difference was Western versus Asian. And I even like, I was like, okay, so, and I pulled like the top line of the storyline out of Heartstopper, which is quite frankly very similar to Bad Buddy.
Yeah.
And I was like, so you like this, this, and this about it? And he was like, yes, it's like, it's such a good story. It's so real. It's whatever, like, but like going on.
Right.
And I was like, okay, what if I told you there's like, though all those top line things that you like are in this show. And this is a BL show that says it's a BL. And these boys do ship work. I mean, RIP pouring off for the lost on me. But like,
they'll be fine.
They'll be fine. But the story is solid. In P-Off we trust. The story is solid. Okay. As we say in Hollywood, everyone's a monster. Entertainment industry around the world is the same everywhere, people. Hate to break it to you.
True.
But I pulled out the top line as a Bad Buddy, and I was like, does this story sound interesting to you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that's BL. And he kind of like, because it's not a productive conversation if you flat out tell someone you're a racist.
Right.
And so like he kind of he realized at that moment what I was saying in a very gentle way. And then he gave BL a chance, and he does enjoy BL, and he's not at the place anymore where he's saying, I would never watch BL.
Right.
Right. And so like there is still that perception of like, well, Western BL is different. It's not really BL. It's different. And so like we're still kind of confronting that. And I think that this is where the fandom comes into it, where when the whole issue with Heartstopper happened with the author and all of that kind of stuff, the fandom spoke out and said, you know what? No, this is BL. And just because you have a problem with BL, we as the BL fandom, we still love this story, and we feel like it represents our fandom and it represents our community. And so we're going to claim it, and we love these boys and we love this story, and we disagree with you about this. And like, I think did it in a really productive way.
I think so too.
And kind of changed the idea of like, is Heartstopper a BL for Westerners? Because Westerners didn't consider it that. Like, honestly.
I think because there's just like not a lot of exposure to just the terminology around what BL is, and just
there's a knee-jerk judgment of like what is BL. If you tell an American, they think that it's something that in some cases it is, but in most cases it is not.
Yeah. So the fandom has definitely changed over the past, like, even just 2 years in general, and it will continue to change. My hope is that we can continue to engage with each other, and we can continue to have these great conversations about the shows, about the boys, because I feel like, especially in this fandom, you have people who are fans of shows, you have people who are fans of companies, you have fans that are people who are fans of just the boys or just an actor. And it's fun to see that overlap of like, we can all have conversations about all of those things, and there's no like, okay, we can't engage with you because you aren't all out for this couple,
right?
You just,
how dare you not love war? Although how dare you not love war? Like, how dare you not believe that Sia is the cutest boy in Thailand? Because I don't know how to tell you this, but he actually has a trophy that proves it. He does. But no, like this fandom is really interesting and accepting. I think that like what we will also start to see more of is like in-person gatherings, hint hint, wink wink, that you see like in K-pop, which I think is so cool. It's just really fun and interesting to watch a fandom like grow from like its I hate to use this term, but like closeted baby, right? Like the baby stage, right? Because, and it feels weird to call the BL fandom a baby because it's not. It's been around for years, right? Like almost a decade over a decade at this point, right? So like it's not the fandom itself isn't in its baby stages, but I think the connected community is in its baby stages still. And like, yeah, like hidden away, right? Like we hide ourselves away almost purposely, but not anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to watch this like growth. And I think that we'll see more and more like people reaching out and like coming together in person and coming together in these other arenas in a way that the fandom has never done before.
Yeah. It will be fun to see specifically what a gathering in the West will look like.
Yeah.
Because they have them so often in Asia that once I feel like, and we saw this with K-pop too, it took a while for, and with boy bands in general, or really any kind of media thing that became like a rabid fan that eventually had a fandom, that it starts small, and then once people do start to gather in person, because no matter what you do, if you do it in person, you're going to interact with the public,
right? There's strength in numbers, there's visibility. Yeah.
And so that'll be interesting to see once that happens in the West, that there are enough people to kind of put together this thing that, and then it'll permeate kind of even more
in
spaces.
The West, right? Yeah. And like, and we already are seeing this happen in South America, where like especially Brazilian fans are amazing. Oh my god,
this is so interesting to see.
Where like there are just these fan gatherings of just fans coming together, which like is so cool and fun, and like I want that in America.
And I've seen lately too where they'll put up flyers of their favorite
just
boys
to promo their boys,
or their like favorite show, and
it's the equivalent of like we have so much fun buying the tuk-tuks, but like what if we've joked before about like buying a billboard randomly in Houston, right? Like we've joked about that, but it's like it's similar to like when we did those You're My Sky tuk-tuks, it literally, we like put where the show aired and what time it came on, like on the tuk-tuks in Thai, not even in English. We were like, we need the Thai people to watch this show. Yeah, like it's similar to that. And like, how cool would that be if we could do that kind of thing like in America, where we're like, no, like go download iQIYI, right?
It's like true. Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw like a BTS poster on a bus stop in New York City, and how I was like, oh my gosh, they've made it. Like, this is a big deal. Like, anytime I saw anything K-pop related in public, and we're getting it more because a lot of these magazines are now buying screens in Times Square.
Right,
so like Fort Pete just sold enough magazines to get their photos on one of the LED screens in Times Square.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's even more important. So if, you know, like if you live in New York and you can go look at that, and you can go like even just take a photo with it,
make
or
a big deal of it,
do those kinds of things. Like we talk about all the time, like buying boys merch and wearing it. Just
that's
like
another thing that's another thing I think is going to happen in the fandom, is that we see this with K-pop a lot, and you see it with celebrities, like Western celebrities, just like general celebrity culture a lot, and even in European celebrity culture. I remember first time I went to Sweden, I'm a big fan of some Swedish celebrities. This sounds very like strange to say it. Like I sound like a crazy person, but I'm not. I am.
Is it celebrities who are Swedish or Swedish celebrities?
I don't know what that means.
So are you talking about the Skarsgårds?
Well, I am a fan of the Skarsgårds, but they're also famous in Sweden. I don't know how to tell you this.
No,
they all got their starts in Sweden.
But they're like international.
They're international. But no, I am also a fan of
people who are popular in Sweden.
In Sweden, yes. Okay, yeah, like people who are celebrities only in Sweden, yes. So and like especially like I've always been very into like European pop groups that never really made it over here. Anyways, all of this is to say that first time I went to Sweden, I was like, oh hell yes. And I like went to all the stores and I bought all of the things. No, not merch, right? So like this is what we have in BL right now, is we all buy merch that from companies that the boys own,
right?
Things that they are selling to us, or things from their companies like about the shows, right? We're buying merch from the shows,
right.
But what happens in celebrity culture, right? Overall celebrity culture, and it happens a lot in K-pop. I did this so much. The number of things that I own that J-Hope owns.
Oh my god.
But is that we will buy things that they just wear.
Yeah.
Right? Like that they've worn, or a brand that we know they like, we'll buy it and we'll wear it and we will consume it. And I think we're going to get that more and more in BL, right? Because that's what I did. I went to Sweden. I went to all the stores and I bought all the things that these celebrities that I liked themselves had worn, or brands that they themselves have worn. And we went crazy in Thailand buying all the things that we could, where we were like, a boy wore this, a boy wore that, a boy wore this, I'm buying it.
That was such a fun experience because we went to Painkiller and Revipa specifically, and we pulled up IG and we were like, this is
at Revipa. It was funny. Yeah.
It was so cute.
We were like, trying to explain to the salesperson what we wanted, and we like couldn't really explain what we wanted to look at. And so literally I just pulled up a picture of War and I was like, this.
And they were like, oh.
Yeah, literally the woman goes, oh, and pulls out the exact right thing. Yeah, like, it's funny.
So I think that's the cool thing is like, potentially they may not go back to whoever and are like, these two girls came here from America.
It's the influence, I guess. It's like, I think we'll start seeing even a deeper influence on the fandom in a different way, where like right now I am wearing a Champion sweatshirt for no other reason than a boy that I like got a Champion deal, and I must have watched he got paid for a single TikTok. He didn't even get a full-on Champion deal. Right. He got paid for one single TikTok, and I must have watched this TikTok too many times. And I was like, I already like Champion, by the way. If you like I think Champion makes the best sports bras, period. So I already like wore Champion on some level, but like I became obsessed with like the Champion clothing. And literally for Christmas, one of my like big Christmas presents was a matching Champion sweatsuit. Like literally I own this because I became so obsessed with the brand because a boy made one TikTok, right? Like, and I think we will now listen. Am I like a fringe crazy person? Cuckoo bananas? Yes. But I think we'll start to see more and more of that, which you see it so much in K-pop. You see it everywhere. And so I think that's another thing that's going to happen to the fandom in 2023 is we'll see more than just the merch from the shows and the merch from the boys. I think we'll start seeing their influence on us a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think we see it just in general with the amount of international shipping that's available.
Right.
Because there was a time where it was hard to get things internationally shipped. Even within the BL merch fandom.
But even like not even that merch. I'm talking about like Champion, right? Like going and buying Champion, or going and buying like Romantic Garden Crew, or going and buying all of these like American Eagle, right? Like things like that. All these brands that like we can just go to the store and buy. Yes, we don't have the same things that American Eagle Thailand has.
So annoying.
But we have it close enough.
At least we have Puma.
Right.
Moss Bank
we got Puma those Pumas. Literally Moss Bank wore these Pokemon Puma sweatshirts and we were like, haha, that would be funny, let's buy those. And then we did.
Because they were available here. I remember scouring the internet for BTS Puma stuff, ironically enough, and it not being available here and just being so annoyed that I couldn't get
Oh my god,
here.
Those BTS Puma shoes, and then we should end this episode or it'll be a million years long.
Yeah.
Super funny. I asked for those for Christmas one year because you couldn't get them here. You had to have them shipped internationally. And I was not super clear about my size. And the person that bought them for me, who's in this house right now, made a mistake and the shoes did not fit me. And I had to give them to a friend. And it was just like heartbreaking that like I finally got the BTS Puma shoes.
It didn't fit.
And then I couldn't wear them.
Relatable.
Yeah.
As someone with giant feet, I feel your pain because I can't get most shoes in my size.
I just like I was unclear about the size I needed.
I don't even think they have my size in those shoes
because they like it's the same thing they do with like Vans and Converse where like there's a men's size and then the women's size. And so I put what I needed in the women's size and he bought it. Or no, I put what I needed in the men's size and he bought it in the women's size, which is like obviously 2 sizes too small. And he was like, he even was like, they were really hard to get because that's such a tiny size. And I was like, I know. I was like, it's because that's not the size I wear.
Oh my god, that's really funny. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for all the BL friends that we will continue to make. We will put the link to our Discord because people have been asking for that too.
And the Discord is wonderful, and it was my first community that I found after I was like, no, Beth Ann, there must be more of us. And
I know, it was so
that
funny.
was the first. That was my first safe place.
I got into BL, and my immediate reaction was to tell Ayla about it and try to get her into BL, and then convince like the handful of friends that I knew that could potentially be open-minded enough to get into this too. And you were like, no, there are more people.
I was like, there's more of us. There have to be. And so then I found the Discord, and then like my worldview opened up so much. So yes, we'll put the link to the Discord. We'll put Jovi. If you don't follow Jovi, follow Jovi. He's awesome. We talked about him. And yeah, just like, you know, cross-pollinate yourselves, people.
Find your BL community, but also just BL fans.
Interact with everyone. We all need each other. And I think the BL fandom does a good job of this. So.
I think so too. This has been Let's Talk BL. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow all things Let's Talk BL at Let's Talk BL.